How to Start a Pharmaceuticals Business by Leonora Carrington. I picked the site for the picnic with trepidation. The occasion was a solemn one for me because of the distinguished quality of my guests. The well-known noble of the highest Mexican society, Lord Popocatépetl, and his closest friend, the Viscount Federal District. I have devoted great thought to choosing the most adequate place to enjoy the company of these two gentlemen, and given the high price of even vulgar restaurants, I finally decided to invite them to a beautiful old cemetery close to the ruins of the Latin American Tower. Once the monarchy had been well established in Mexico, King Chapultepec von Smith II, son of Azcapotzalco Guggenheim, promulgated the law definitively prohibiting all instruments of speech transmission of a non-animal nature, whether radios, telephones, televisions, walkie-talkies, microphones, etc., etc. Our civilization thereupon rapidly advanced toward a golden age in which pleasurable silence has made every street a garden and every home a center for peaceful, if not always intellectual, thought. It is now customary for the most distinguished members of society to hold picnics in the very center of the city. Games like chess, snakes and ladders, and Ludo have become peaceful national pastimes. It is said that in the old days the masses killed bulls for pleasure. It is not known how they did this exactly, but it can be assumed that they used firearms or some such artifacts in common use in those dark and barbarous times. Ever since the edict issued by the Black King of the North, New York the First, an edict titled the Law of De-Electrification of the Americas, it has been unclear how those powerful electrical forces were once used, forces we now make use of only in our rituals. But I see that I am wandering from my story. It was on a hazy day in the month of May that I made my way to the St. George Light and Power Cemetery in my modest one-mule sled, loaded with my choice foods. Not only tins of Norwegian enchiladas from Japan, but 6 bottles of the rare old Indian drink called Coca-Cola, bottled at the source. The cemetery was shrouded in a veil of mystery in the early morning light. Its closely packed tombstones gleamed white on the side the rains washed them, black on their shady side. In the middle of this spider web of narrow alleys was a tavern, the Fat Swallow, to which those visiting this city of the dead repaired for the comfort of strong drink. The place had apparently become some sort of church in the old days at the end of the Christian era. That is, a place where melancholy rites were celebrated, and believers gathered to hear discourses from a priest while they contemplated their God, now dead. A poor man nailed in an awful way to a wooden construction and languishing in apparent agony. An interesting example of the psychology of our ancestors, that they should have adored such a sinister image. Seeking a site for our picnic, I made my way slowly to a comparatively open space where 2 men were digging a hole. They told me they were unearthing the remains of the distinguished Lady Haughty Corner, who had only recently died in the course of her studies of the customs of the underground Home Office or Ministry of the Interior. Her widely known thesis, Prayers of the 20th Century, deals with the mystifying discoveries made by archaeologists when they opened up the famous Home Office building. "This cemetery is for the exclusive use of ladies," said the taller of the 2 diggers. "They asked if I would lie down in the hole to help measure its size." The humid ground was not as inhospitable as it might be supposed. I even felt a certain languor and sleepiness as I made myself comfortable in Lady Haughty Corner's grave. The men went about taking their measurements with great care. When their work was done, they helped me out, and I was taking my leave of them, I discerned my 2 guests approaching through the mist. Lord Popocatépetl and the Viscount Federal District. I picked up my basket and went to encounter my distinguished friends. We soon found a tranquil spot. Lord Popocatépetl recounted the latest developments of his rheumatism. Ever since the beginning of the year, on account of the humidity, the lower half of my spine had been prey to spasms. I've consulted Dr. Major Magician, who assured me aches and pains are purely psychological, and advised me to wear pants lined with monkey skin tanned in pulque. So far, I've felt no relief. Quack, responded Federal District. Rheumatism is caused by disturbances in the equinox. The gray fluids flow with Staphylococcus. There are such things as anti-rheumatoid collars, you know, I said. I've been using one only recently. The very best. Of my own manufacture, by the way. They cost only 2 fermented cheeses. Manufacturer's price for you. As we chatted in this manner, a man wearing a white suit approached us. He hesitated a moment before addressing me. Leonora Carrington? Yes, I answered, somewhat surprised that a stranger should know who I was. The man handed me a packet some 10 inches by 30 in size. It's the National Lottery Prize. You won it with the number XXXCCC. I congratulate you, Leonora Carrington. After thanking him, I opened the packet carefully. He disappeared into the shadows with a little bird's laugh, which I did not like. We soon discovered that the packet contained an India rubber casket, fit for a very small child. What practical use this prize may serve escapes me, said Federal District. Popocatépetl, however, examined it carefully through his lorgnette and announced, "It could serve very well as a table for our picnic lunch." True enough. It would be a good idea to keep our picnic off the humid ground of the cemetery. While we ate, however, we became more and more conscious of a disagreeable odor emanating from the diminutive casket. We had scarcely finished eating when my companions tendered their excuses and made off, leaving me with the picnic leftovers and the India rubber casket. On the outskirts of our sad, savage town, I was overcome by a feeling of profound melancholy, though I fought it off by stuffing a large amount of jasmine essence up my nose. Fear kept me from opening my prize packet. I simply went on staring at it for a long time. I felt an uncertainty and a degree of anxiety that seemed to emanate from the ancient graves of the cemetery itself. It was as if the anguish was not properly mine, but something from out of that distant 20th century of dread repute. I don't know how long I was prey to these sensations, but suddenly I heard again the same tiny bird's laugh, and looked around. I could make out the white silhouette of the person who'd handed me the India rubber casket. His face was so shrouded in haze I couldn't make out his features, but his voice sounded right beside my ear. Go ahead and open it. Why hold back? With no will of their own, my hands lifted the rubber cover, embellished with lily-of-the-valley designs, only to find another box made of that ancient substance that once used to be called plastic. I would have liked to desist in my task, but continued to obey the voice of the white individual, and with a dexterity of their own, my hands succeeded in opening the rose-colored box. What I saw caused me to stare with a mixture of wonder and fear. It was a human corpse, more or less the size of a toothbrush. The homunculus boasted an enormous mustache. It was marvelously preserved, probably by some method known once to the inhabitants of the Amazon jungle. I realized that this little body had been larger in real life, but still not as large as the average man today. My eyes were drawn to an inscription on the inner side of the cover. Joseph Stalin, A.D. 1948. Received on the occasion of her birthday by Queen Elizabeth II of England, who sent it as a Christmas present to Dwight Eisenhower, USA, who sent it to the National Museum of Mexico in commemoration of Saint Light and Power, canonized in 1958 by the Vatican. Quia nobis solis artem, per nos solo investigatum, tradimus et non aliis. Had this doll perhaps been a contemporary of Saint Rasputin, A noble at the court of the Tsar of Russia? With growing excitement, I examined the letters of the inscription preceding the names of that Eisenhower. Another Russian, perhaps. Doubtless, the letters USA had been correctly translated by Haughty Corner in her thesis as United Self-Annihilation, just as USSR stood for, according to the same authority, United Solo Sepulchre Regression. Perhaps this is a phrase from the ritual of the Catholic Church, or something of that sort. I could not understand the Latin phrase very well, of course, but I surmised that it had something to do with the desiccated mannequin. Who knows, but that he might have been a dwarf who served as a court fool. With these romantic notions were passing through my mind, the man in white approached closer and said, "Nowadays all initiates are aware of the Dark Ages, when the world was empty and could not count on the gods. Divine spirits manifested themselves on earth only after the unmentionable catastrophe filled the entire planet with horror. This relic from those ill-fated times possesses medicinal value too. Ground into a powder with a few drops of marigold oil and some royal poinciana seeds, it yields a valuable salve for the treatment of depression number 20. It's also useful in certain exercises of light levitation. We all know that Western medicine includes a branch of benign poisons, good for curing certain pathological conditions." He proceeded to pluck one of the long hairs from the mustache of the mannequin and place it delicately in my mouth. I noted a sardine taste that made me shiver. 20th century druggists promoted odd practices. I suddenly felt invaded, as if by a divine light that whispered, "Aspirin was like this." I fainted. When I came to, the man in white had disappeared, and I was left with the homunculus of the Tsar in the India rubber casket. It's scarcely necessary to add that the tiny mannequin allowed me to found what today is the leading pharmaceutical establishment in the entire city. Naturally, imitations and falsifications abound, but the authentic apostolin is one of the country's leading exports. It's useful in the treatment of whooping cough, syphilis, gripe, childbearing, and other convulsions. Though not exactly rich, I enjoy ease and tranquility, everything I need, and whatever is required for an agreeable and distinguished life.